Today's show, we have Duncan Davidson, who came in all the way from Berlin to be with us, not specifically for the podcast, but for our 0111 conference. We had a great chat about the German startup scene, innovation around the world. We talked about Ant and a lot more. Check it out.
I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Duncan Davidson, you're in the CTO Studio.
Oh boy.
How does it feel like a CTO studio?
It feels like a CTO studio. I mean, it's a studio. We have lights, we have cameras,
whiteboards,
and it also feels just kind of rough enough, like scrappy enough that it's not settled in. It's not like ossified. It's not produced like to the nth degree. There's
a little bit of scrappiness.
Exactly.
Which we paid a lot of money for.
I'm sure. It's hard to emulate a good scrappy.
Eric said if you want scrappy, it's an extra 10 grand. And I was like, where do I sign?
Yep. Well, I see you made the investment, man.
So you just landed from Berlin, DE.
Yes.
And how was the flight?
Flight was fine. I got in at midnight, which sucked. But, otherwise it was good. I mean, Delta to New York and then sit in New York for a while and then all the way to San Diego.
Where was hometown before you moved to Berlin?
West Coast.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I'm being vague. I lived in Portland before.
Portland?
Yeah.
You kind of have a Portland vibe.
Yeah? Oh, I moved to Portland before Portland got cool, and then I got out of there once everybody took over. No, and then before that was the Bay Area.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you got involved with Wunderlist through Chad?
Exactly.
And you oversaw what we all know is this major acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see many German startups being acquired by American companies?
No. There's that will probably start changing more and more as the German startup scene develops. But right now, the German startup scene is still, I don't want to say it's in its infancy, but it's still primordial, right? It's still finding itself. There's some business to business stuff. There's a lot of the startup scene that came from the B2C world in the form of knockoffs. So there's the companies that were making the German version of the food delivery place or the German version of whatever. Company called Rocket Internet did a really good job of going through and identifying markets and localizing them and making an app. And that did really good things for the German startup scene as far as getting people in and a lot of people knowing how to get the stuff done. And now we're into the next phase, and it's in this interesting place because it's no longer about the Rocket Internet stuff. We have Zalando, we have some other big companies that are working well, but it is kind of gelling.
You mean it's sort of solidifying now as a scene?
Yes.
So is Berlin sort of the hub, or like which city is like the tech startup city? From
an image perspective, Berlin. I mean, you can walk into any coffee shop in the center of Berlin and swing a rope, and you will hit a lot of people on their laptops working on their startup idea. And we've got a lot of people doing the blockchain because the blockchain is all.
What is blockchain in German?
Blockchain. Just blockchain.
Blockchain, man.
Yeah.
Legit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of hype, but man, the tech is legit.
Yeah. It depends on what you do. I mean, I have to mentally edit. Whenever I hear blockchain, the hype has gotten so much that I have to mentally edit it and replace it with distributed ledger and be like, okay, what are you really trying to say? Are you trying to say you've got a proof of work here? Are you trying to say...
but you're doing the same for AI. You're also changing that up to like machine learning or
of course
predictive analytics or...
Yeah.
So I worked for a German company, which was considered a startup that was incubated out of a German university in Aachen. And I was building device drivers for the BSD kernel for proprietary PCI encryption cards. So I was deep in kernel land in C and all that. And
Hardcore.
I think I accidentally made some contributions to the BSD kernel as well.
Along the way.
Kind of like you built Ant.
Accidentally along the way, yeah.
Except that, you gained some fame for that. But I think my code got deleted. But anyways, but one thing I felt about the German culture, now this is late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a terrible, this is like 50 years ago in internet time. But we couldn't ship.
Yes.
Like, I felt like, so just briefly, I think we were in the 100 megabit backbone days, or was it 10 megabit backbone, where my encryption throughput was, I had to try and get to like 40, 50% of the throughput. And then, but during my tenure there, my time there, everyone switched to gigabit backbones. And suddenly, encrypting at 5 megabit throughput wasn't good enough anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they set a goal of like to get to 18 or 19 megabits. And I could only get to like 12 or 15. And I was the only guy on the project. And they never shipped because I couldn't get to fucking 18.
Right.
Ding, ding, explicit podcast.
Mark the mark.
But whenever I see a Volkswagen sort of as a totally different scenario, whenever I think of the German startup scene, I'm shocked that they can ship product because of the zero defect vibe. Now, so how often do you encounter that? Well, as a German cultural thing,
there's an interesting mix of the two, and one of the things that I think Rocket Internet and their startups did very positively was get that mandate of shipping, because it's really hard to say this without stereotyping. So please forgive a little bit of stereotyping here, but that German desire to succeed and not get it wrong really does permeate a bunch of the culture, and so there's an interesting mix in the startup scene of people who are really gung-ho, they're highly adaptable, they want to ship the stuff, and then there's the other folks who really want to make it right and get it just so and not fail. And I think that's something that the German tech scene really has to continue working its way through. And they shouldn't lose the part that makes it really great. I mean, Germans are great about making stuff well. Like, it'll take them a while to sort out how to make a really awesome BMW, but once they do, oh yeah, it's good.
It ships off.
Right. The thing that Germans don't seem to do a good job with is airports, but that's a whole nother story. As Berlin Airport sits there. But yeah, Germans are really good at making a process and then following that process and getting to a result that really is great for customers. And that's a very valuable skill.
Which in the life cycle of the startup, it might not be valuable in the beginning, but boy, when you've found product market fit and you start building sustainability, process is what gets you to the next level.
Exactly. And that was actually one of the toughest things for me coming into the German scene, even coming into a company that wasn't all German. It was about a third German, a third European, a third everything else maybe, was really getting to the point where I, as somebody who naturally leans really adaptable and who will do change on a dime and go after whatever else, can really identify and work with the folks who are really good at like just that we're going to do this and how do we do this right. And that's a really good balance to have. But if you don't identify it right off the bat, then you can have conflict around it, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I remember as a South African in a very, very German company, I was miserable most of the time. I mean, I was thankful for the platform, and I absolutely loved the work I was doing. But just that was very, very tough environment for me to not be shipping. So I mean, I would love to actually visit the scene now because I'm very, very curious with my history as to how these startups are actually engaging the scene.
Well, they are working this through. I mean, you see just like any culture, you see pockets of all of the types of behaviors, but the small startups, they're scrappy, they are moving, they're figuring it out. I think where it gets interesting, or where it gets a little more interesting to see how this works out, is in the larger companies that try to do like a startup spinoff or some of the big enterprises that want to, still maintain that sense of control. And we see this like in the cloud as well, right? The startups I work with, all of them are very cloudy, right? They're very much in Azure, or Amazon or Google Cloud. And the German companies are very, as a class, very hesitant to move in that direction, right? They still want to control the data. They still want to, they're still just on the cusp of that, figuring out that maybe my data is safer in a facility that's, custom built for making it safe. But they're still working their way through that. So on the one hand, you have that conservatism, but on the other hand, especially in Berlin, but also Hamburg and several of the other cities around northern Germany and even Munich and whatnot, there is this smaller culture that's really about getting stuff done and really moving.
And so are those the other tech scenes, sort of just sort of anecdotally, Hamburg and Munich, that you're sort of seeing rise as?
Yeah, we see a lot of people from Hamburg, some in Munich. Munich, of course, is big in that industry, so there's a lot of tech of various kinds there. A little bit in Frankfurt, but less than I would have expected, actually.
And I know there's a large Turkish population in Germany.
Very large.
And how are they doing, sort of integrated into startups, and is it?
Usually the foreigners that I see in startups are actually from places like Spain, Portugal, France, Greece even, and Eastern Europe. There are fewer of the people from Turkey, especially that migration that came from Turkey in when the wall was still up. What was it, the 50s, 60s, something like that? That group of people, I don't really see a large number of people jumping out into the startup scene yet. Okay. There is another wave of immigrants or of people from Turkey that are in the scene.
But not from that wave. Yeah.
Not immediately. Although I say all of this, and I just realized one of the people I work with is actually, one of his parents is Turkish that came over in that wave. So he grew up in Hamburg, and so he's in the startup scene. So there you go.
Well, these are all just, this is conversation. This isn't, again, it's a lot of generalization.
But as a general rule, there's a distinct Turkish community in Germany from that era. And
which I know from living there. It's a pretty distinct.
Yeah. And this is why when you go to any German town, you can always find Doner and all of that. But
so good. I miss my Reibekuchen.
You should come. Currywurst and Leverkuchen for everybody.
My goodness. Yeah. Currywurst was my staple lunch.
Yeah.
I feel like I lost my beer virginity in Germany, which is not a great place to do it because it's perfect beer.
It is. Well, you want to hear something sad? I have a very sad story.
Is it going to involve Coors or Miller?
No, it's going to involve beer though.
Okay.
So about a year before I moved to Germany, I found out I was allergic to wheat.
Oh my goodness.
And of course, Germany, land of awesome beer and awesome bread. And I just walk by it all and smell it.
So you don't touch it?
Mm-mm. And you know what my favorite beer was?
Hefeweizen.
Of course. Beer with wheat floating in it. So maybe I could get away with some of the more processed beers that don't have, well filtered. Wheat.
But nothing.
The beer I really want's the one that has the wheat in it.
Now tell me, have you seen the Stone Brewing in Berlin?
I've not.
Because one of our 7 CTOs members is Stone's CIO. You know Stone Brewing, right? Mm-hmm. So they massive initiative in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
So you should take your guys. I mean, it kind of feels weird to have an American microbrew / behemoth infiltrate, the motherland for beer. But
we actually have a couple, and I know this because they also tend to be places that sell pizza, and a lot of my colleagues like to go get pizza, even though I don't join them, of course, because beer, pizza, wheat.
What do you eat, brother?
Good food.
Salat,
vegetables, Obst.
No. Are you vegetarian?
No.
Okay.
I eat a lot of meat and Asian. We have a high amount of Asian, although it's interesting having been on the West Coast for so long where we have so many different kinds of Asian. The Asian in Berlin is more focused. It's a lot more about, Vietnamese.
So, I want to shift a little bit to you mentioned so I want to just touch on Ant. So I have a friend who was working when I got to know him with Lucene, and he was going through the Apache Foundation. He was going through the process of getting his project, I think, absorbed by Lucene. I hope I'm not messing this up, but basically my point is he was going through rigmarole to get into the Apache Foundation. What was that process like for you, and how did that happen? I mean, you create Ant because you obviously need it for yourself, and then what happened?
So Ant was sneaky, and it's an interesting story from so many different directions. I mean, one of which is, I messed up in so many different ways in its creation and didn't even know it till later. But another way it's interesting is that it was really a stealth tool. The way we got it into Apache was through Tomcat. So I was working on Tomcat at Sun, and I wanted to be able to build Tomcat on my Mac, on my Windows machine, on my Unix machine, and that's where the impetus for Ant really came along. And so the way we kind of finagled this was, when we got Tomcat ready to go into the Apache Software Foundation, we needed to ship its build tool because, of course, Tomcat used Ant to build, and without Ant, you couldn't build it. I mean, somebody could have sat down and wrote some makefiles or something, but no, we just slid it in, and apparently I pissed a lot of people off that way.
Oh,
apparently a lot of people, once they figured out that Ant had gone out with it and what a big deal it became, they were a little upset that it had gone out. But that was irreversible at that point. And it was actually funny that they were upset, because at the time, when I made Ant, I went and talked with the compiler folks. I talked with all sorts of people around JavaSoft, and everybody's like, yeah, that's interesting, but and it wasn't really used inside Sun at all. It was just for Tomcat. But when it got out, and then all of a sudden the community grabbed onto it and took it somewhere, that's where people got interested in it and went, hey, we had this bit of IP we didn't even know, and it's out. What happened? We didn't make that decision. I was like, actually, we did. We were all sitting around the room, and we're like, oh, there's a build script thing that needs to go out. And everybody's like, oh, sure, ship it.
Yeah. That's crazy. And did you maintain the project then as an open source maintainer?
So, no. When it went out, we shipped Ant and Tomcat together. And then I spent the next probably year working on a lot of community things around it. So I actually wasn't hands-on in the code. And so, Tomcat got all the attention, and then some folks found Ant, and it was these folks that found it that pushed it forward, and they really took it somewhere. And so much so that when I actually got done with my year-long of community building, making sure everything was happy and kosher, I wanted to go back and hack on Ant. And of course, I had all these ideas because I wasn't happy with the XML format. I wasn't happy with a lot of things about Ant that were there. And I came in, I was like, I've got these ideas. And people were like, who are you? What are you? What? No. Why don't you go and make some patches and prove that you are really part of this community?
Wow.
I'm like, what the hell?
My baby.
Exactly. But so I went through about a week there in that process of really being pissed off. But
well, I mean, it was like you had to mourn sort of a loss, right? Because
but then it really struck me, and I came to the realization very quickly that what was actually awesome about this was that there was this idea that I had that wasn't really, it wasn't like a brilliant idea. It was just an idea of something that needed to be done. And I did it, and it went out into the world, and then other people actually took it. And people found so much value in it that when I came along to say, no, it's all wrong, blah, blah, they actually wanted to defend it. And they really wanted to keep what it was there. And they saw something in it that maybe I didn't see, right? Because I was so focused on, XML is kind of a really crappy way of describing this stuff. And, all the other issues that I had in my head. And they saw something and they took it and they went with it.
So do you feel proud today? You would feel proud about that,
yeah,
right?
Damn proud.
Yeah,
damn proud.
And I think I had a brush with that when IRC went mainstream, and well, I guess I don't know when that was. I would say it was like mid-90s. I mean, I feel like it was early adopter. Like, I'm South African though, so for us, I discovered the internet through IRC, and mostly I was begging Americans to send me CDs
because you wanted the music.
because I was very into music. The CD format the South African government wasn't letting that stuff in. It was very expensive. And I immediately started sort of the cold, like, hey, so I'm South African. Oh, you're South African. And then, they would be amused. I would be amused. And then I would be going for the kill.
Right.
Hey, there's this U2 CD that isn't being released in South Africa. Is there any way?
And of course, the people on this side would be like, oh, you poor thing. You've got to have it. And yeah, you really should be. But you don't even have the chance of buying it. Come on, we'll just ship it.
And I'm like, I can send you some, some things I can make for you. No, don't worry. And I'll never forget one time I got like this box of, and must have been the guy's used CDs, but I couldn't believe it.
It was jackpot.
And I think that sort of prepared me for this world of trying to build a community of CTOs where I'm trying to introduce them to something that they're like, what? You want us to do what? Get together and do what? I'm supposed to be working. Why do you want us to sit around talking? My point is, I compiled one of the first IRC servers in South Africa, part of the Science Foundation. And so I became the maintainer of it. I learned very quickly. As a root user, I recompiled it so I could override some channel. I mean, I'm not proud of that, but it worked.
Well, at the time, we all did that. I mean, I wanted to run MP3s on my little laptop, but there's no driver, so
Yeah, so you do all that.
Yeah.
But I created a channel, a South African specific IRC channel. I think I called it like Alive or something. It was some dumb name, and I had an experience where I was like the creator of the channel, and it just became its own thing. And they were starting to arrange meetups, when that happens in IRC where people start meeting and flying all over the place. And I remember having a moment where I realized this is not mine anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This I used to arrive at these meetups as, oh, there's the guy who started it. And then after a while, I showed up to some of those and it was like, who are you? Like, so who are you?
Right. And it's so tricky to know exactly when you should let go in that case. I imagine it's a lot like parenting. I mean, I've only got a 2-year-old. I'm only just now discovering this for real. But I imagine there's something similar in that sending something into the world and then knowing when to let it go. And of course, everybody messes that up at some point.
And I think we see on the internet regularly how people just never let go when they need to.
Yeah.
So as an American living in Europe, you obviously have an interesting internet. So I feel like I'm a citizen of the world as a South African. So I have a perspective that is less, embedded in certain ways. Like the city is the most amazing city in the world, or America this or America that. While I appreciate those things,
America first, man. America.
What I appreciate though is sort of that global view on everything, and I seek that out. And I'm wondering for you as someone from the Bay Area, Portland, now in Germany, you're getting your news from there. You're seeing a perspective on innovation that is different to even I've been here for 18 years and I'm very curious to know, so what do the Germans think about American innovation, and what do these multinational companies, what role are they playing in fueling innovation? I mean, I was interested to learn about Microsoft's sort of strategy to bring German startups into their ecosystem. So what are you seeing in terms of perspective on American innovation coming from Silicon Valley or things like that?
So everybody in Europe, around the world, I mean, if they will admit it or not, they still have mad respect for what's going on with Silicon Valley. They still have, everybody kind of has this, oh my God, that's amazing. Even if they're looking at the other parts of it, which can be really too much, or they look at the excesses of Silicon Valley, or even if they are criticizing what's going on now with the social media giants that have made all these, quite frankly, avoidable mistakes that they could have learned from history on. Even with all that critique, there's still this awe about Silicon Valley. I have a lot of conversations with what makes the Bay Area unique, and of course, I tell the history. The military was there, the schools were there. It all came from that initial run into technology in the 40s and 50s, and it just kept snowballing, right? And it kept going. And it is a special place. And I see a lot of people that wish they could create that somewhere else. And it's almost disconcerting because you want to say, well, actually, these are the kinds of things that take decades, right? You need the universities, you need the spirit, you need the willingness to take the risks, you need the ability to fail, you need the ability to learn from failure, and like we touched a little bit, some cultures don't have that as much. Some cultures in the United States don't have that. The East Coast was bad at that for a long time. It wasn't until recently that we got a really great startup scene in New York, right? Well, recently in terms of Silicon Valley terms, right? Yeah. Not in terms of the last 4 years, because it's been longer than that. But but it is fascinating to see that, because there's this desire to try to emulate it, but then there's also this hesitancy or this caution that people have. And from my own perspective, I have some of this, because now that I live outside the United States, I look back and I see that our tech giants are based Seattle, San Francisco. We have some East Coast, right? But, the FAANGs and the Microsofts, it's all East Coast. I mean, it's all West Coast, right? And in a world where everything's going great, maybe that's good. In a world where all of a sudden we have interesting things coming up around how well people can go between borders and where people can work and all these other geopolitical questions, it seems a bit dangerous to have this concentration here.
And it's I always feel like things start off with this hope for decentralization and meritocracy, and everything starts off with going out and people owning their own ideas, and then it just gradually just comes back to a centralized service. Mm-hmm. Everyone ran their Drupal sites from their own hard drives and disks, and now they're all doing it with one or two companies. It's it's just this human nature to just optimize to the point of a single point of failure, and then someone has an oh shit moment, and then things change, and then there's some sort of revolution, mm-hmm. and it all just comes back again.
Right. And you see this in various aspects. You see this in the technologies. You see this in the way the companies are working around the technologies. Heck, you even see it in industry. Like in New York was the center of the center of the American economy. Now it's split between the coasts and a bit of Chicago, some of Texas, right? But there is this strong urge to centralize. And we see this in networks, like you said. I mean, Usenet was totally distributed, and now everybody uses a Facebook or whatever to communicate with. And there's good reasons for both. But I think we don't actually talk about the good reasons for both enough. It's in some ways the failure of the distributed internet folks that people really try to grab onto is that with anonymity comes this dark side of humanity, right? And so then there's an urge to be like, okay, well, we want to be someplace where we can have some trust. And how do you have trust unless there's something mediating that trust? And then that turns into a focus point, and then everybody moves into the focus point. And then if somebody abuses that trust, well, what happens next? Like, I'm curious, is there another social network that'll come along now that Facebook has abused the trust enough that people are really up in arms? Or will we just decide not to care about it and they got us?
My theory is that because we all have one life that we live, and we all go through, youth, adolescence, mid, 20s, 30, and then you grow old, and then you learn from experience, then you die. Mm-hmm. That we're doomed to just have to relearn the same lessons. The way we pass it on to the next generation isn't an efficient handoff protocol.
Right.
Like there's precedent, and there are things that take place where you're like, oh, we should never let that happen again. But I just feel like these lessons are having to be relearned, because we're just, we're a brand new set of humans that weren't around 100 years ago. Right. And those people are all gone.
Well, even like the really big lessons like Nazis, right?
Yes.
We had to learn Nazis are bad. And now it seems at least some of us no longer are there.
I
right?
know. And now you're starting to see terms come up again, and you're starting to see political shifts where you're like, wait a minute, guys, we
had this discussion.
We had this discussion. But I think the problem is that you haven't had it with people who actually went through it anymore.
Right.
So now you're doomed to sort of, repeat history. But I just think this is a cycle that isn't really going anywhere. It's just we're innovating. Science to me is the one thing where we're building on the findings of the previous. No one's trying to reinvent or refigure out gravity.
Right.
It was done. It was documented. It was proven. It was experimented. It was observable. Boom. We're done with that.
And even where we do go back and revisit it, like, of course, we had Newtonian gravity, and then you get to the Einstein thing. Those are very different models of the universe. But even that, there's several hundred years between those 2 points, right? And Newtonian, even though we know Einsteinian physics is more accurate when it comes to sending things into orbit and very complex orbital mechanics, and also a little tiny stuff on chips. But everything else, Newtonian physics still works just fine, because it's a way of explaining the world that works at the scale in which most of us work with the world, right? And yet we have a society where we're willing to say, well, I don't know, maybe gravity doesn't exist. Maybe there's still a flat world, right?
Wow, man. Whoa. I don't know. That keeps on coming up. The whole flat world thing.
I keep thinking it has to be a joke, right? They have to be in on it.
What really gets to me is the experiments that they're doing to prove, like, that just to me is a reflection on how bad education system has gotten.
Yeah.
That you can think that you could do a cosmic sized experiment in your living room.
Right.
Like, no, that's not how it works. I watched one YouTube video with the total solar eclipse. And because you couldn't see the moon move in front of the sun, that was empirical proof that NASA is lying to us, and that that's actually a projection.
Right.
Because I'm like, where is this coming from?
Right. Well, it's the same people that made those complex disk things, to explain orbital mechanics that would move back and forth, right?
Yes.
Turns out things moving in circles is actually an easier model to deal with.
Anyways, it's so. Do you think that the world is still learning from what's happening in Silicon Valley, or are there different centers of gravity forming where that renders that sort of opposite? Like, we don't really care about that.
Thank you for bringing us back. we got way.
I was gonna go. Yeah.
I was ready for it too, man. I was like, let's talk. No, but seriously, no, I think the world is still learning from Silicon Valley, but I also think that the world is, at least chunks of the world are more ready than they've been in a long time to take those lessons and move forward. One of the places where I think you really see this is in China, right? It's really popular right now to say, oh, China, all this stuff's going on, and it's crazy, it's magnificent, it's it's a whole different universe. And I had pretty much ignored China for a while because, oh yeah, we do all of our manufacturing there. I thought that was like, well, but it's what we do. But in watching some of the communities that are there, like the maker communities that are in Shenzhen, that are using the fruits of all this manufacturing technology, where they can go pick up all the pieces to an iPhone somewhere and then repurpose it, right, and do something else that's crazy. Watching the story of I believe it's Naomi Wu, who is in Shenzhen. She's got there's quite a bit of controversy around her for various reasons that I don't know, but I watched her story enough to see that they're doing things there that nobody else understands, and because the environment there is that lovely melting pot of new ideas and new things that have all come together in very interesting ways, and people are taking a fresh look at how to put those things together. And so while Silicon Valley has been that for us for a long time, I think we're on the verge of seeing more places actually do it on their own. But it's going to be in very strange and alien ways to those of us who grew up in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I think it's the it's the circumstantial input to people's ideas. Like, you you observe certain things, and then you start thinking about how you can combine some ideas, and then you innovate. And when it's truly based on your environment, then obviously you don't care what's happening in the major centers, because this is an innovation that helps me in my environment and then the populace around me.
Right.
So do you guys aren't affected by Brexit in any way? I mean, that's nothing to you, right?
No, we're not worried about that at all.
Okay.
No, nothing's happening with that. It's on illusion. No, I have no blinking idea what's about to happen there.
Okay. But it doesn't affect the day-to-day in Germany, or, I mean, it's basically a UK thing, and it's not, or is it a Microsoft issue, or are you having to do any work because of this?
We're not doing...
Pisses you off?
Yeah, no, we're not like... I think everybody is not doing work on this because they actually don't know which way it's going to fall.
Yes.
And until they know which way it's going to fall, everybody has a feeling it's way too premature to figure out what to do. And so everybody's sitting going, what's going to happen? You do see some effects. I mean, both good and bad. One thing that's been interesting is we have a program in London, Microsoft for Startups in London. And, they keep going. There's a lot of startups that are going through. The startup scene there does not seem to have chilled much. Right. On the other hand, of course, you hear about the banks all trying to figure out what they're going to do when something happens. Germany thought they were probably going to get a lot of banking institutions move over from London into Frankfurt. But it seems like actually some banking stuff is actually going to New York, interestingly enough. But yeah, nobody quite knows what the hell is going to happen. So everybody's like,
yeah. So no one's pitching you with ideas like, hey, for Brexit,
no,
we anticipate this, so our startup is going to that.
I haven't seen that at all. Right. And there's opportunity there. I mean, like if they close the borders, which, there's articles in the newspaper about, what's going to happen at the border crossings. It's going to take trucks zillions of hours to get through.
I see those.
All that. I mean, okay, that's, on the one hand, it's horrible and not really what we want to see. On the other hand, wow, there's some opportunity there.
Opportunity.
Right.
So you are the CTO in residence then. Is it for Berlin or for Germany, or how does that, because they have a few of them, right?
Right. So we have offices in London, Berlin, Tel Aviv, Sydney, Beijing, Shanghai, and Seattle. One thing is interesting about that list is we don't have anything else in the United States.
I heard you mention countries and then a city.
Yeah. So the other thing is that we started the program actually looking at each of the startup communities as something that might be different or that might need a lot of individualizing for the program. And so we really went into those cities and those locations with the idea of being extremely custom for each of those places. And there are differences, right? There's differences in terms of culture. There's differences in terms of each place has their source of VCs. They're getting funding. Each place has their own laws that they work within. So like it's not as easy to do funding in some countries as it is here in the States. But from a technical perspective, they're more alike than not. So we're in the middle of, okay, well, we have these focus points in Berlin and London, et cetera, et cetera. But how do we actually then look wider from those points? So I'm a CTO in residence for our startups in Berlin, but even in Berlin, we have startups from France and Finland and Portugal and Spain and all these places around Europe. So it's really hard to define in terms of geographies now. Okay,
so and are those startups that you guys brought into Berlin to help with the incubation? So you say, hey, we love your idea, move to Berlin.
They don't actually move to Berlin. So we say, we love your idea. And since we're looking a little bit further down the road than traditional incubation, we're actually looking at how to get them associated with the sales efforts for Microsoft, get the B2B startups hooked in with the big Microsoft sales machine, because turns out Microsoft has a huge sales machine. And that's one place where we can actually do a lot of things that are valuable to startups in the B2B space. So for a company in Portugal, for example, they'll actually come to Berlin 3 times during the program, and we'll have a week at the beginning, a couple days in the middle of a 4-month period, and some time at the end where they'll come and work with us. And the rest of the time we're working remote.
And so your role as a CTO in residence is, are you a CTO mentor then for your startups?
Mm-hmm. Meant to be.
And what advice do you find yourself giving the most?
Interestingly, and this is something that surprised me, it's not the tech advice so much. I mean, the tech questions that we get are actually somewhat pedestrian at times, right? It's like, how do I get this thing working on your cloud, blah, 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 right? But a lot of times the most important discussions I have with the startups are actually non-tech or their people problems in the scope of tech. So, for example, one of the startups that we're working with didn't have a CTO specifically in role. They had two people that were kind of doing the CTO role, but of course, part of the CTO's role is to be a public face for the company and to work with the external people, and they were running into confusion around this, right? And so we talked and really helped them get to a point where they could resolve this within their organization and no longer have that bit of what's the right word? That bit of contention, and so that they could actually just focus, right? And so yeah, I will do events where the whole purpose is to talk tech, and then inevitably we actually talk about the people stuff.
Well, I mean, this is, I'm glad you asked, because this is why I started 7 CTOs.
Yeah. So why did you, what about this particular people thing actually is 7 CTOs really digging into?
Literally asking. You're literally welcome. Gave me that question like I wrote it to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
No,
it's right there on a paper.
Yeah, I think it was when I was realizing as a CTO of my startup that I was getting away with, I had the mantle of authority that I didn't feel was being fair to my employees anymore. So I would say stuff to my C-suite, and I literally coded the app that became our product, and so I had a lot of ownership and authority in the company. But I did realize at one point when my two partners, I felt like they graduated into business people.
Mm-hmm.
So they each brought their own competency to make the startup work, but they did turn into metrics-driven, like outcome-driven business people. And I realized it wasn't happening to me. And so a source of our conflict was usually when I was a child and I was throwing my toys out the cot, and I was, hey, we talked about the maturity sort of to let things go and to shift ownership. And so I felt like I was failing the people side of running and building our company. And I think the biggest sign I got was when we were riffing on an idea, and the CEO asked me, so, how would we do this? And I went to the whiteboard and I filled up the whole whiteboard with shit I made up right on the spot. And I noticed them sort of making notes, and they were like, oh, the budget, and we'll reprioritize this. And I was stood there watching them discuss amongst themselves, and I was like, guys, I don't know if this is going to work. And yet they were like, I mean, I didn't say that. I was thinking this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized I need help. And so a mentor is hard to find because a mentor has to have time for you. It's usually someone that they're busy with their own things as well, and it's hard to find. It's almost like a relationship, like a lifelong relationship in many ways. So I realized I need to talk to other CTOs, and I needed to talk to people who had done this before me and with me and against me and around me, and so that I could literally go and draw that same thing for them, and then be able to say, dude, that whole thing you drew there can be done by using this project, or why are you constantly integrating this part? But do you realize that you have a mental model about this architecture that doesn't exist anymore or should be upgraded? And so I realized I wasn't going to get that from generic business people.
Right.
And so that began my journey in 2013 to just one CTO at a time, get them into cohorts of 6 or 7 and become each other's peer advisors. And what I realized very quickly was that I thought that those conversations would be more technical. And now we seldomly discuss architectures in those conversations. It's way more people issues, CEO challenge, Snowflake engineer challenge, sales, hiring pipeline, timing, like should we be doing this now or 2 years from now, raising money, personal productivity. When do I know my startup is in financial trouble? Why isn't my CEO including me in certain strategic conversations? And so being able to talk through that stuff in a confidential environment is what is happening.
Yeah, well, it's one of the challenges of being a senior technology leader, whether you're the CTO or VP Eng or just the lead developer, right? There's the CTO label kind of does encompass a slightly broader scope of people, at least when it comes to this, is that it gets to be a very lonely place in a way, because you've got your C-suite that are looking at you, or your leadership team if you're in a bigger company that are looking at you, and you're supposed to have all the technical answers that can be implemented by the team and everything. And then your team is looking up to you and saying, well, what are we going to do? But they expect you to have it right. And of course, then if you don't have it right, here comes the bad part. Well, nobody's really talking to you about it. Nobody's actually, it becomes uncollaborative in a very strange sense that I've long been uncomfortable with, because all of a sudden you're in that position where you're supposed to know it all, but you can't know it all. So then what?
Yeah. And I think if at that point I go to someone that I have an attachment to that is economic, you're afraid to talk to them because, well, what if I tell Duncan that I don't know this part? I better go figure it out myself, because if he realizes I don't know this, what other question? Germans love doing this, again, another generalization, but if you were wrong in this, what else are you wrong in?
And here's the weird thing about Germany and the Germans that I didn't understand until way after it kicked my ass. Germans are very direct. They get in your face. They tell you what they think, right? You're on the street. You're doing something wrong. They'll tell you what you're doing wrong. There's even, the jokes about the old lady who is hanging out in the window watching the people go by on the street, right?
The German old ladies.
Yes. But, and I know anybody who's German who's listening to this, I apologize, but you're probably laughing a little bit. But when you're in a position of authority, that actually changes in a very subtle way, because all of a sudden, again, you're in that place where you're supposed to know what you're doing. You're supposed to know what's going on. You're not supposed to be failing.
You mean how your employees view you? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
so that direct communication, it changes, and instead of being the direct communication that you want about the particular issues, sometimes it becomes something else. And deciphering that is very interesting.
Yeah, and I think the value of being able to not only have orthogonal thoughts and outside of your context input, but to actually have that month in and month out is where I'm starting to see incredible transformation. And so a lot of what we're working on as 7 CTOs is emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see, and we're in a room where we do one of our forum meetings. I am seeing these tech geniuses relate at a human level where the collaboration is 10x, 100x, because of the love and respect that you start building in this dome of trust and cone of silence, and it's, so for me, that is transformational, and that is something I have personally made my life's mission.
Well, and that would be something that would have been really helpful for me a couple of years ago when I was in the middle of my own journey into this in a very strange way. I mean, I've been in technology, I've been working with startups, I've done stuff for 20 years, right? But I had never failed in such a spectacular way until I got to Germany, and I was in that role where I was, I had to know what I was doing, and yet we had all sorts of tensions going on, and people were out of alignment with each other. And because it was dealing with this and the cultural issues all at once,
It's a doozy.
Yeah. And I could have really used those 7 people that I could go, hey, what's going on? And then maybe one of those 7 could be, this thing that you have a blind spot with this actually, you're leaning too much on the logic side because you expect people that will actually go with the logic. You can make a logical explanation, and you think you're in a logical culture where you can make a logical argument, but there's still, all your people have emotional things, and you're not listening to their emotions. So true, right? Man. And if somebody could have come along and been like, hey, dude,
And that comes with, that's hard work. I mean, to get to that place where you speak into my life because you actually care about my outcome, that doesn't happen over a meetup with some pizza and beer. I mean, what happens there is a lot of ego showcasing, because even as introverted technologists, I feel like we often show up at meetings by saying, well, I have to tell them about all these things I did because that's how I'm going to earn their respect.
I'm accomplished.
Yes. And to see the transformation happening in these confidential environments to where 4 or 5 months in, when I say, hey, when you say to me, well, maybe there's a blind spot that you're not sort of paying attention to, I am ready to hear that from you, and you're coming from a place of genuine sort of empathy for me.
Right.
And that to me is where we're not just helping accelerate your learn and your growth in the now, but we're doing it for the rest of our lives.
And there's something key in that you're willing to hear it, because I'm sure there was any number of folks that were trying to tell me something along the way, right? But for whatever reason, it wasn't the right channel, or it wasn't the right relationship, or it wasn't the right whatever. And so, the human brain, as it's processing, goes, yeah, but. And it's that but that gets you in trouble.
I mean, I was, again, this is the German episode, but I was literally, my project manager, my division manager brought me in and said to me, because I started feeling comfortable, I was commanding the language, I understood the culture, I was starting to make more strategic suggestions and decisions, and I was starting to bleed into other functions. And my boss brought me in and he said, what do you think, what do you think your future is at this company? I said, well, I hope to, when you go, I want to, he's like, that'll never happen. I
Whoa.
said, what? He said, well, you're not a German, so that's not going to happen. And I got on my bicycle, rode home, told my wife, we're packing, we're leaving this shithole. I was very upset. In retrospect, I wish that we had stayed longer, probably not at that company, but I could have used like your boss is an asshole. He wasn't, he was great, but he gave me some pretty negative feedback on that. And I'm sure there was a lot I could have learned, and I could have, I needed some growth and ownership of that. So,
well, and you'll be happy to know that, like in the German companies that I work with a lot, that attitude is shifting. Now, this could be because they're all in the startup land and they're all in that rough and wild zone, but there are more people that really want to listen and learn and sort out how we can work across all the cultures.
I love that.
And that's one key thing I think is really going well right now, at least in the zone of startups that I'm working with and watching. Yeah. Have we talked too long? Are we over?
I thought we just started.
Yeah, well, we can keep going.
I'm not afraid. So there are 2 more questions.
Actually, I have one for you.
Oh.
Why 7?
Thank you for asking. Again, well timed. 7 is, I wanted to, so I had a hard time naming this organization. And I had a Zen moment where I closed my eyes and just asked what is this? What am I trying to build here? And I closed my eyes, sat in my office, and I literally saw 6 CTOs sitting around me. Like, hang on, that's what this is. It's 6 CTOs. And I went to GoDaddy, registered 6ctos.com, no problem, ran out the door, and I told my first colleague, hey, I know the name of this thing. It's called 6 CTOs. And he's like, 6 CTOs? You guys oh, you're all sick and you're all helping each other. I'm like, no.
Hi, my name's Duncan. I'm a CTO.
So I instantly, I mean, that was like one data point, and I was like, dude, this is not gonna fly. I had a phonetic problem, and so I ran back to my office and I registered 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 CTOs.com because I knew I had the formula.
Mhm.
And then I was really wanting to go down to 5 CTOs, and it just felt like, if one person doesn't show or 2 people can't make it, then you have a real awkward situation. So, and then I didn't really want to go with 7 because I felt like there's the number is so like owned by, religion and spirituality and, whatever you want to do with that. So, and then I thought about 8 CTOs. Sorry, this is much longer than I thought.
No, this is great.
And
we can cut off all that stuff at the beginning. This is the good stuff.
And then I got to a place where some friends just said to me, dude, 7 CTOs sounds awesome. And I was like, okay, let's do this. So now my forums, we have about 14 forums now around the world. And some of them are Zoom forums. So we have people from the UK and Pakistan and now, so I generally put about 8 people in it so that if one person can't make that meeting, then it's, 6 or 7 people. And it's working well, man. 7 CTOs.
Sieben.
Do they have the term CTOs in, is it like South Africans use like managing directors, or they use directors more than they do Cs?
Right. And in Europe, you hear managing director a lot, but at least for the technical roles, you do hear CTO quite a bit. I think since it's a newer role and it's not necessarily a formalized within the management structure, and it's not written into the organization structure that you have to present yourself as a GmbH or whatever it is. Yeah. And there's all sorts of stuff I don't know about, but it's those roles like the CEO, CFO, or the managing director, those are so codified by all this discussion in the law, whereas CTOs are whatever.
Do they say CTO? Do they say CTO?
They always say CTO to me, but I think they're just being polite because mein Deutsch ist schlecht.
So do you have, when you see a CTO come to you, a self-ordained CTO of a startup, are there things that you see in them where you think like, dude, this person is legit? Like they might be young, this might be their first rodeo, but boy, I like what I'm seeing in this person, and probably not going to talk to them a lot about what they should be doing.
No. No. I mean, usually there's almost always something about everybody that has a thing. The problem is that a lot of people that are in this position are in it because they're technically great.
Mm.
And really, when I'm dealing with a lot of the CTOs and the startups that I work with, the technical questions, there's so much going into it that, I mean, it's good. It's great topics. We can geek out over containers and Kubernetes and serverless and all the buzzwords all day long. But what really sets some people apart versus others is it gets back to the emotional empathy, the emotional quotient, how people actually see themselves and how they see the role inside the organization, and see how they need to manage that in every which direction.
And that, again, I mean, it's something I see. Before I started 7 CTOs, I was flying to tech scenes for almost 2 years, and everywhere I went, that was this distinguishing factor was, do you have the self and social awareness?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand where you fit in the organization? And then can you be a participant in that? And it's a challenge for everybody.
And there's another data point I'll give you. So in my day job, we have a program called Scale Up, which is the one where we try to attach business to business startups with the Microsoft sales stuff. And we have an interview process with that. And as part of that, I sit down with the CTO of the startup for 45 minutes, and we talk about the program, we talk about the benefits, we talk about, all sorts of stuff. And at some point, when I'll get the question, what else do you do besides the tech stuff? And when I start talking about, we're really wanting to help people more. We're really wanting to help people with not the technical challenges, but also the human challenges, how to grow an organization, what an organization should do when you go from 2 people to 5 people to 15 to 25 and how this grows. And the vast majority of the CTOs I speak to when I'm talking about that's the thing they're excited about. And of course, that's the thing that our program actually has the least amount of time for, because we're all about doing the business to business sales stuff and blah, 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 blah. But there's this desire amongst a lot of the CTOs I speak to for something in this area. How do I? It's a repeating question.
Amazing.
And there's a real appetite for that.
Yeah.
So for whatever that's worth, that's what I'm seeing when I talk to my startups.
I love it. So as we close, do you or have you ever in your past taken photos at TED conferences?
I might have.
Okay.
Yeah. For about 7 years, 8 years.
Amazing.
Yeah. I got really lucky. I had
not like TEDx, like TED,
no, like TED,
TED.com.
like TED. Yeah. When you go to TED.com and you see the photos, I mean, you see the grid of all the videos that you can watch, you can look at, and there's always a picture there of a speaker doing or some expression, right?
Yes.
For quite a long time, I was the guy at the edge of the stage that was doing that.
And how the heck did you land that gig?
Luck. Pure luck.
Right, no. Right time, right place?
Right time, right place, definitely. So, in technology, of course, I'd always carried my camera around, and I was going to all the O'Reilly events. I was there all the time, either speaking or attending or something. And there was one of them where the photographer that was supposed to be there didn't show up. And so the conference organizer, Gina Blaber, came up and said, "Hey, you've got a camera. Can you help? Right? Can you help?" It was like almost like a plead, right? And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. I'll take a few photos for you. No, not a problem." And it turned out that they liked them. And so I did that for a few years, and
at the O'Reilly conferences.
Yeah, exactly. And my stage photography got better, and I got to listen to all the talks. And it was kind of a win-win, because at the time I was doing a lot of consulting. I could make free time. I could do a couple of weeks work on some Rails app, and then I could go and take some photos, and I could go do a couple of weeks worth of work for some other company, come back, do photos. And at the Web 2.0 conference one year, June Cohen from TED was there in the audience, and I ran into her after the show, and we talked, and we had a great conversation. We were just like talking as people. And at the end I was like, okay, so I would kill myself if I didn't say this, but I'm the guy who made photos that go up there. So if you ever need a photographer for TED, I'd love to do this. And she smiled and was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, that's never going to happen.
And did you feel like shit right after you said that? Or did you feel like I owed it to myself to do that? Okay.
I was happy I took the swing.
Okay, cool.
Right. And I was like, okay, that's not going to work out. Right. And then several months later, I got a call from June saying, it's time to come.
Wow.
And I got to go to TED, and yeah.
Eric, that's all you need to do, man.
Yeah. Right time, right place. I mean, but that's the story of so much. It was a story of pretty much everything I've done well in life has been right time, right place.
But I think taking that swing, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a insanely pressure-filled moment where your heart's racing. Should I say this? I can lose a lot of capital with this person right now, but I'm going to do this.
Yep. And that's why I went in low-key. I was like, I'm going to kill myself if I don't do this.
Yeah.
So I have to.
So you set yourself a point of no return. You had to do it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to do a part 2 and part 3 and part 4 with you.
Sure. Let's do it.
Thank you for being with me, man. That was fantastic.
Likewise.
See you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to thectostudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or two for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.